As you know, we continue to work our way through the most challenging recession that we have faced since the Great Depression itself. And in terms of state revenue, this recession may be the most challenging. When I made my allotments in November, my hope was that those would be the last budget changes that we would need to announce until we passed a 2011 budget, which we will hopefully do this coming April. Unfortunately, the revenue situation has deteriorated to such a point that I feel like we need to make some adjustments right now. In my view, when the hole was 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars, that was still a manageable enough level that I felt we could continue to work our way through the year in hopes that things would get better or that we would come up with a way to fill the hole towards the end of the fiscal year. With a budget hole of over $100 million, my concern is that failure to act right now would lead to a situation where at the very end of the fiscal year we would need to make some draconian decisions to some programs that would have virtually no time left in the fiscal year. In other words, I just feel like it's time to act right now. The two prisms that I used in analyzing a way to fill this $106 million shortfall were these. First, I felt that it was very important that, if possible, we don't make the 2011 budget year any more difficult. We always have the option available to us of drawing down 2011 Recovery Act money and using it in 2010. And while there may be a time in this fiscal year where I need to do that, my goal is to avoid that if at all possible, because 2011 is challenging enough and I didn't want to make it any more difficult. Secondly, I wanted to, if possible, keep with the priorities that I talked about in the State of the State address, which is to not make any additional cuts to education, to public safety, and to our safety net. My view is that those programs have been cut at such a significant level that further cuts are simply not acceptable. And although the decisions that I've been required to make today have been difficult and are certainly not good public policy, fortunately I have been able to satisfy both of those criteria. When I say they aren't good public policy, what I mean by that is that we do not have any easy solutions. We don't have any good cuts that we can make. It is simply a matter of which are the worst of the cuts that are out there and trying to make decisions that have the least impact on Kansas citizens as possible. Let me run through with you very briefly how we're filling this $106 million hole. The first thing that I looked at was to analyze what is the actual hole. And in my view, the hole is not 106 million, it's 85 million. And that is because there were some revenue losses that we recognized in February that I believe will be made up in the next couple of months. And those are principally due to the fact that people are filing their returns electronically. We have a lot more returns that have been filed. We've made 35,000 additional refunds over this time last year. And so I believe that because we won't have to make those refunds in March and April and subsequent months, that 15 million of it can be explained for that reason. Another 6 million can be explained because of a large tax refund that we made in February that we had budgeted to make in the last quarter of the year. So when you take those two factors into consideration, the true hole is $85 million. There are three things that have happened in the last several months that also mitigate the impact of the hole by an additional $35 million. One is that Secretary Sebelius made the decision at HHS that there would be a reduced Medicaid clawback to the states. That results in a positive amount of $16 million to Kansas in fiscal year 2010. The second change that's taken place is that Insurance Commissioner Prager has removed an exemption on an assessment that she was able to remove, which will result in $4 million additional to the state in 2010. The third change that's taken place is that payments under the TANF program, Temporary Aid to Needy Families, are down $15 million. We believe that the reason that they are down $15 million is that people are having an extended period of unemployment compensation, which makes them ineligible for those funds. So we have $15 million that we didn't budget for that we're now able to transfer. That leaves us with a deficit of $50 million, and we are filling that $50 million deficit in three ways. First, we will not be making the final quarter payment to the Death and Disability Fund under KPERS. As you're aware, KPERS has a separate death and disability benefit. It is funded by the state. That fund is actually overfunded. It does not need this payment in order to be solvent, so we will be withholding that $12 million. Secondly, I'm calling on the legislature to pass the primary seatbelt law. It is currently illegal in the state to be in the front seat of a vehicle without a seatbelt on, but because we do not have a primary seatbelt law, you cannot be stopped for that offense. You can only be ticketed if you're stopped for another reason. The federal government has said that if the states pass a primary seatbelt law, they will receive certain amounts of money. In Kansas, it amounts to $11 million. The legislature has refused to pass a primary seatbelt law, but is close. It has passed the Senate. It is now in the House, and I'm calling upon the House to pass the primary seatbelt law. Not only would this give us an additional $11 million from the federal government, $10 million of which we can use towards the general fund, it will also save lives. Because the research indicates, and I was just looking at this yesterday, that in states that have enacted primary seatbelt laws, seatbelt usage goes up 10%. And so we can anticipate that there would be less deaths and serious injuries if that law is passed. Third, I am announcing that we are canceling the lettings of all highway maintenance projects for the remainder of fiscal year 2010. That includes both light maintenance and heavy maintenance. It does not affect any program that's been announced under the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, but it does affect a large number of projects, about $60 million of which was light maintenance, about $40 million of which was heavy maintenance. $26 million of that would have been spent in fiscal year 2010. The remainder would have been spent in fiscal year 2011. By eliminating those lettings, we will recognize in fiscal year 2010 that $26 million. It will also help us fill the gap that we face in fiscal year 2011. I've obviously consulted significantly with the Secretary of Transportation, and while the Secretary of Transportation certainly does not want us to cancel any road project, she's assured me that this is not a matter of public safety, that the roads will not be in as great a condition as they would have been otherwise, but public safety will not be jeopardized. The final thing that I'd like to talk about before I open it up for questions is I think we need to analyze why are we in the situation that we're in. And I've spent considerable amount of time really over the last several months taking a look at our monthly revenue figures, where we get our revenue from, what our revenue patterns have been over the last 5, 10, and 20 years. And unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that it is not just the recession that has put us in this current situation. If it were just the recession that put us in this current situation, the good news is that obviously recession is going to end, and we would then be in a position that we could recover. We are certainly in this position partially because of the recession, but we are also in this position because the legislature has been on a tax-cutting binge over the last 20 years that has decimated our revenue streams. And in the process, in my view, the average working man and woman in this state has been left out. And that's true for two reasons. First, special interest groups have been rewarded time after time in this building. If you look at the taxes that have been cut, these aren't taxes that are being paid for by the 2.8 million average Kansans. These are taxes that are paid for by a very narrow group of wealthy special interests. We have eliminated the estate tax. 900 people a year benefit from that, cost the state $40 million. We have eliminated the franchise tax. We have lowered the property tax from 35 mills to 20 mills. We have gone from 30 exemptions in sales tax to 99. And we've said that if you're wealthy and on Social Security, you're going to receive a tax break, unlike what the federal government does or virtually every other state. And yet, what have we done for the average person? Virtually nothing. If you go out and talk to the average person and ask them, have we cut taxes in the state, they will tell you that we haven't, because they haven't seen it. Sales taxes haven't gone down, income taxes haven't gone down. Maybe they've gotten a little break with their property taxes, but more than likely, their property taxes have gone up because we put so much responsibility on local units of government as we've gone on this tax cutting binge But the average Kansan, during this time of massive tax cuts, has seen their taxes go up. So what cumulatively have we done? Since the mid-1990s, on a cumulative basis, we have cut taxes over $9 billion. But virtually none of that is seen by the average person. It is seen by special interest groups who are powerful enough to hire lobbyists and come into this building and get what they want. The second reason that this is particularly bad for the average person is that this tax cutting binge has impacted the integrity of the very programs that Kansans want and need. We aren't able to spend the money that we need to spend on education. We aren't able to spend the money that we need to on our universities. We aren't able to spend the money on our safety net. We aren't able to spend the money on public safety because it's all been given away to special interest groups. We can get through this current budget problem today with the adjustments that I've announced. But if we're going to solve this problem for the long term, we have got to undo some of the very poor public policy decisions that we've made. We've got to quit giving away the tax base to the special interest. I'm not asking the legislature to undo all $9.5 billion. What I'm asking the legislature to do is, on a temporary basis, give us back $400 million for 3 years so that we can fund these programs at the level that they need to be funded. In the meantime, we'll work our way out of this recession and we'll get back into a growth mode. But if we continue to give these breaks to special interest groups, and if we continue to maintain that we won't undo any of them, the only people that will benefit from this are a very small number of wealthy, well-connected people, and the average Kansan is left out. That's not acceptable, and I'm asking the legislature today to take a long, hard look at what's happened over the last 20 years, because if you do, I think you'll conclude that it's time to stand up for the average Kansan. Thank you all very much.